I didn't put my suit on my Manx flag for this.
Well, you are coming into view now, and it's a Skeetnet special, and it's Kevin Oliphant Smith of Douglas, who is known to many around the Isle of Man. I think that's fair enough. Politically, you've featured in campaigns, you've been a Douglas councillor, and this is quite an important year on the local scene. So, Kevin, good afternoon. It's a Thursday. Thank you for joining us. Tell me, we've had 5 years of Isle of Man government coming to an end. It's the election in September. What have been the good points? What can this government hang its hat on, so to speak?
Well, I think too much emphasis is put on COVID. So I know a lot of people would say, well, they've done really well with COVID. They kept the borders closed and all that stuff. But I don't really want to focus on that because that's a one-off, hopefully. So if you go back to when the election was in 2016, what has been achieved since then apart from COVID? And I can't see very much at all. I see very little that's been achieved. I see a lot of promises that were put forward in 2016 by a lot of the candidates who have now been elected, and not many of those promises have been redeemed at all.
Do you think that's a fault of the system, though, that we've got the block vote, we've got a democracy that is perhaps a little bit skewed? Do you think, we've got these candidates who go through the election process with great ideas and the enthusiasm is wiped out?
Well, I mean, I knew a lot of the MHKs or candidates before they were elected, and I have seen them change over time. Their views and even their personalities. They've become, a couple of them that I know have become people who were very much for the people, to being kind of absolved by that government kind of old boys club, if you like. And now they're just agreeable pretty much on everything. And I just don't feel like there's anybody in there that stands up and actually fights for the little man, if you like, for us guys.
I think certainly in the last few years, some of our representatives have had financial uplifts, haven't they, to be members of departments and so forth. And there's been a restructure of that, of the MHK's pay. So you'd like to think there'll be a stronger voice, maybe in this election. What can you see the trends being? Are we going to have new candidates? Are we going to have new people elected, or is it going to be same old, same old?
I think you're going to hear a lot. I think this election is going to be one that we've never seen before. I think we're going to have more candidates coming forward than ever before. I think it'll be unprecedented. I already know of a few that are coming forward, and the quality of some of the candidates coming forward really does scare me, because we've got people coming forward that have no knowledge of things that are going on in the Isle of Man, the things that need to be looked into, the problems that the Isle of Man faces. They've got no political background or experience. They've not learned the system. They've got no interest or experience in how government works as different departments and things like that. So it scares me, because if some of these people are successful based on their personalities, I mean, I think we're going to be in trouble.
I mean, we hope that the Manx public aren't going to be hoodwinked by a bunch of charlatans who won't perform. I mean, surely that could never happen. But if we look positively at the current House of Keys, we have got some good players. You listen to the politics, you listen to the debates, and you may be a little bit cynical that it's election year and maybe some of them are starting to be a little bit more vocal and demonstrative. I don't know, but you must be able to pick out one or two that you kind of admire or respect.
Well, over the years, I mean, I continue to work, even though I'm not elected, I work continually with some of the MHKs even today. There are a lot of things that have been put forward in the Keys over the last 5 years that have initially come from me. I've passed on to MHKs and said, can you take this forward for me? I'm constantly in communication with a handful of MHKs and trying to give my input and in hopes that they can take that on for me and improve things.
Has that always been frustrating, or have you felt some comfort, or you've seen some positives come out of that?
I've seen a lot of change and positives come out of some of it. Some MHKs are very, very good to work with you. I've got, I would say, about 4 or 5 of them who always get back to me. I'll send them an email, I'll send them some information, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't know that," but I'll look into that, and they'll take it forward.
So I guess they sit on the back benches, do they, or maybe they're a little bit more influential?
Half and half. I've got both.
Well, that's good. I mean, it just shows that living on the Isle of Man, we're a population of 85,000, you can actually get in touch with your MHK, and if we were in the UK, it would be an entirely different matter. So what concerns you about the big issues coming up in this election? What are we going to be fighting for, do you think?
I think the big thing to be concerned about is all the money that government has put out in the last 12 months with COVID support, and whether it be through the social security system, business support, of course, Department of Health. There's been a big spend there, which they're going to try and claw back one way or another. And I think we'll start to see that gradually over the next election, over the next, whoever else gets in the next term. So I think, watch this space. I think we're going to have bad times ahead.
Well, we had a budget that was quite neutral in effect. It was quite balanced. There wasn't anything, what can I say, too spectacular. What are you thinking? Some stealth taxes coming in on the way, road tax, things like that?
They'll be cut to services, I believe. I think they'll start cutting back on services slowly. You'll see a reduction in services. You'll see longer waiting lists. You'll find it harder to get appointments with your doctors and consultants. You'll start to see the mental health services will probably be affected as well. That always is. And then you've got the likes of, the budget that they did, I thought it was disgusting what they did to the government workers with the 1% pay increase. For the last 12 months, we've been told that these are our essential workers. Let's go out and clap for them every week and all the rest of it. We couldn't have got through this without them. But yet, when it comes to rewarding them, and that's the wrong thing to do, because you're going to get a lot of health workers, and I've worked up there, so I know because I've spoke to them. During COVID last year, when it first came in last year, and we went into the first lockdown, there was an awful lot of staff that were brought back to the hospital who were qualified, but they were not doing that as their full-time job anymore, and they went back to support the COVID response. And I spoke to several nurses and said, well, why don't you do this full-time? Have you never considered staying in this job? And I got the same response. They were like, no chance, because I can go and work in an office 9 to 5, a lot more pay, holidays, no dodgy shifts,
And of course, the health service has had, I think it's a £15 million injection for this transformational process to obviously correct, I think, quite a legacy that we've had at Nobles, haven't we? It's been well reported that there's been huge turnover in staff. There's been issues with waiting lists and just the general performance at Nobles. So you could argue that that's being addressed, with this huge management restructure. I mean, obviously you're in tune. Are you getting some good feedback about that?
It's not. It doesn't all come down to money. I mean, you can throw loads of money at the health service. It's also the environment the working environment for the staff that are there, the systems that are in place. I mean, the staff that are there at the moment are under a hell of a lot of pressure. There's been so much more responsibility put onto nurses. Nurses are now doing things that previously doctors would have done. And nurses are just doing so much more now. And when you look at the salary structure of what a qualified nurse actually gets, I mean, it's not really that much at all. If you look at, say, I know you can't compare it to the finance sector, but even if you looked at some sort of administration role within an office, it doesn't vary much at all.
Well, anyone that is on a range between, say, 25 and the late 30s on the island, it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult if you want to buy a house. It's difficult if you're stuck in the rental trap. There's a lack of affordable housing. And then you've just got the general day-to-day running costs of your life. And I think, really, you've got to be over that 40k, haven't you, to kind of not survive, but have a quality of life that is seemed to be boasted about on the island, that's enjoyed by many, but those on the front line, are they getting a piece of the action they should do?
Absolutely not. I mean, I've got to be careful what I say now, but I spoke to staff. One story comes to mind where, they loved their job, they loved working at the hospital, and they wanted to continue doing it, but they said they just felt like they couldn't achieve what they wanted, which was to get on the property ladder by continuing that job. And that individual was living with their parents, and they weren't so young.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting.
It's not like it was it? The accessibility to affordable housing has gone. That is evaporated here on the island. Now, just before, you mentioned about mental health, and that's spiked my interest in we've had some absolutely worrying headlines about the level of suicides here on the Isle of Man. Is that something which you're aware of? Does that kind of enter your sphere now and again, or is it like the rest of us? We saw this headline and thought, well, this is supposed to be a great place to live. How can that happen?
I think the figures I've had, I was speaking to someone the other day, I think in the last 12 months there's been 24, 25 suicides on the island.
Yeah, I think there might be an overlap with coroner's enquiries and things, but it's a very worrying amount, and really, when you look into the coroner's reports, you can actually find them online, so it's in the public domain. I'd advise anyone that's tuning in just to take a look and see the background where these people have had a history with mental health, and there has been questions asked about their treatment leading up to that fateful day. So is it just being brushed to one side? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, one of the big problems I find, and I've had GPs say this to me as well, I think it's very dangerous because the mental health services health records are kept separate from the rest of the NHS records. So basically your GP cannot access your mental health records, which is very, very dangerous, because if you go and see your psychiatrist, for example, he prescribes you 30 sleeping pills, and then there's nothing stopping you from then going and seeing your GP and getting another 30 sleeping pills prescribed, because he can't access that record.
Blimey, I never knew that. That seems so basic and so obvious, and yet there's a huge risk there, isn't there? Okay, so we've covered a bit about health. You're a Douglas resident. Health, is featured there with a couple of doctor's surgeries closing down. What are your thoughts about that? Are we meeting the demand with health on that front?
No, it's funny actually, because the Isle of Man government is proactive in trying to attract new residents to the Isle of Man, and yet I've spoke to some of the primary schools in Douglas they're bursting at the seams. You know, as far as the doctor surgeries go, we all know they're full. They're well, I think it was a recent report, wasn't there, that they're above the recommended safety limit or something like that. Now, when Kate Beecroft was health minister, I spoke to her, and she actually said that there was plans in place to build another new doctor surgery in Douglas. Of course, she wasn't minister for very long, and that got put to one side. But we do need to think about all these services, because there's no good saying come and live on this wonderful island that we have, and it is a wonderful island that we have. But if I can't,
just don't get ill.
don't get. Make sure you don't need to get your kid in a class that's got less than 30 kids in it. You know, I mean, I know they are looking at some of these things. They are investing in more support for children at school. And I had a meeting recently with one of the headmasters of a primary school, and I must admit I was really amazed how much support the kids do get now for things like mental health, any anxiety they're suffering, any problems at home. Educational support officers are brought in for those kids, so that's really, really good.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, you're in public service, and you know that there's so many people out there fighting the crusade and believing in the job that they took on. You know, that is right across the board. But let me say, we've got this election coming up. You said you've got concerns about the level standard of candidates who will be governing the Isle of Man in the future. What about yourself? Would you fancy another crack at the title?
I'm still weighing it up, if I'm honest with you. Some days I think it's not for me. I don't, because the way I think of it is, right, whoever gets elected, you've got to work with them. So I can't guess who else is going to get elected. If I was successful, I don't know who I'm going to be working with. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to work with other members to achieve a goal, and they're not willing to compromise or work with you, you're at a dead end. You're not going to achieve anything. So part of me thinks, do I want to spend the next 5 years, you know, knocking heads with someone and achieving nothing but stress? Or do I want to use that time and just enjoy my family and fight from the outside? I don't know.
Well, that is the beauty of politics, isn't it? It's a collegiate approach, it's caucusing, and it isn't everyone's cup of tea. I mean, do you wonder whether, when, you know, the following years, is there going to be a poison chalice inherited? Is there going to be anything left in the pots? Is there going to be a legacy that we can't manage? With those who are getting elected, have they got any idea what they're going to be taken on board? Because if you do look at, say, the employment situation on the Isle of Man, we've got about 1,000 who are receiving benefit now, at least. Where are the job opportunities going to come from?
I mean, that's a really, really good question. That's something that we're going to have to invest in, and I think there's been other people recently speaking who are much more privy to that information than me. There does need to be investment in the island for business start. I mean, I know there is business start schemes and things like that, but maybe we need to be... See, at the moment, we're bringing over companies. We can see that we're bringing over new businesses, and I know some of the people that have moved here and started businesses. The problem with that is, and the Isle of Man government always say it's great because that's bringing in more jobs for locals, but most of the time those businesses bring their staff with them. They might employ 1 or 2 locals at low-level entry jobs, but generally speaking, they bring their staff with them. So that concerns me, because I think us as locals are being left behind, and the opportunities on the Isle of Man, even for myself, and I've considered this as well, I could get a much better job in the UK than I've got here.
The opportunities are shrinking under the present climate, perhaps. Of course, if you're watching and you've got any thoughts about what myself or Kevin is saying, please put them in the comments box either now or if you return to this broadcast later. So, job prospects, employment prospects, how's the economy going to grow? What's going to happen?
I mean, just going back to housing, because I think we just touched on that one.
Yeah.
That's one thing that wasn't mentioned in the budget, and that's the biggest problem. I mean, that goes along with the economy really, because the most of where people's money go at the moment is into rent.
Yeah,
that's the majority of your salary. And you know, I'm in private rented accommodation. I don't own, and I think the prospects of me owning are difficult on the Isle of Man. Not impossible, but difficult. I'm in a lucky position because both me and my wife, we're not on high salaries, but I wouldn't say we're on the lower end either. So average. Although she looks after me really. But yeah, there's been no investment put into housing that I could see in that budget. You know, whether it be commissioners, council houses, nothing there about first-time buyers. I mean, I've got one for you here. There was, when I stood for election last time in the by-election, there was an issue that came up in regards to planning from Hartford Homes. They put in to build, I think it was 11 houses up Farm Hill Lane.
Yeah.
And a couple of residents complained to me about it. Now, again, this hasn't been reported on. I put in a complaint about that. I opposed the planning application on the basis of they're going to be destroying this land to build concrete houses. In the planning application, there was no mention of any greenery or the impact on the environment. Also, there was nothing there to suggest that there'd be any option how many of those houses would be first-time buyers. So that application was dropped, and successfully they agreed to put in a new application, which they have now done, which has been approved. And they're now making sure that 2 of those houses are going to be for first-time buyers. And they've also agreed to plant lots of trees around the area and greenery. So that's a win.
That's a very good news story, and you'll be aware that in Douglas there's a lot of brownfield sites, and the one that amazes me is near the Derby Road. It's the old school, isn't it? You know, there's a huge vacant space there. You've got the old Summerland complex, and you've got other places that are dotted around in Douglas, and you just wonder if only they could be converted into affordable housing. So instead of people paying, you know, £800,000-900,000 a month on rent, they could be actually purchasing their own property under an assisted scheme. And I think the island is crying out for that now, isn't it?
I also think that the reason, I mean, the house prices are going through the roof and houses are being snapped up. I mean, it's funny actually, I've literally been today, I've just got back from looking at a house this morning, and the house only just got put on the market a few days ago, and the estate agent told me there's been 3 offers put in already.
Blimey. That's incredible, isn't it?
And the problem is, and I've spoke to a few estate agents, people are seeing the Isle of Man, you know, because of Mr. Quayle. He's been on all these media sites, and they think, oh, the Isle of Man's doing wonderful, let's go and live there. And you're getting these rich people who are going on the estate agent website, ringing up and saying, I'll buy that house without even viewing it, cash. And then, of course, it's, you know, supply and demand. And the locals who are trying to get a nice family home for themselves, they haven't got a chance.
I've just got a comment pop up from Nikki.
Why can't
Nikki, I'll tell you, it's difficult not to be controversial about this, but at least 3 of the candidates standing for the last election should not have been allowed to apply. Never mind stand. So I can't quite grasp what's behind that. And of course, we've got to be very careful about defamation of character and so forth. But I guess we're talking about the Douglas South election. That was the last election, which was contested and won by, is it Paul Quine and Claire Christian, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They seem to be quite vocal in the Keys at the moment.
I can't guess who the three candidates could possibly. I might be one of them. Maybe I shouldn't have been allowed to stand. I don't know. I don't know who that could be. There was 10 candidates, so that could be, those three people could be anyone. But going into the elections, one thing I will say, something I strongly believe that shouldn't be allowed during elections. I don't think any elected member, current elected member, should be allowed to involve themselves in assisting candidates get votes.
You think that goes on? There's a bit of a clubby action going on.
Definitely. There's at least 2 MHKs in the Keys now who only got in because current MHKs and MLCs went round knocking for them and saying, vote for my friend. And they've not got in based on their experience or their knowledge. And even their manifestos, to be honest with you, the manifestos don't mean anything because I can tell you this from experience. A lot of the MHKs don't even write their own manifestos.
That's rather worrying. And as we know, there's some skills to getting elected, and I'm aware of it. They call it granny farming, don't they? And it's a postal vote, tactics, where we know that there's, say, 100 or 200 votes to be gained by being ahead of the game. And there were some good candidates I can think of in one constituency who dropped the ball on that. And unfortunately, that made the difference, and perhaps not the best candidate made it through, and we've been suffering ever since. But there you go. So let me see. You're a Douglas resident. We'll move down the prom, shall we? It's just round the corner from you. Has that affected you much?
Well, I've got friends and family actually that own businesses on the prom, so it's very much affected them. I know. I've got a friend of mine who owns a hotel on the prom, and they are just at their wits' end because they weren't eligible for any support because they didn't take a wage. So because they didn't take a wage, they weren't eligible for the support because you had to be getting, I think it was a minimum of £200 a week for the previous 13 weeks to be eligible for the Mirror. So if you weren't taking a wage, you weren't eligible. So their business has obviously suffered. I know a lot of food places on the prom, and some of which have closed down. I see that they're advertising at the moment for new businesses to move into the Villa Marina Arcade. Of course, the Italian job was there. That went. And historically, those shops in that location in the Villa Arcade have never done very.
No, I did see quite an interesting suggestion on that maybe the Manx radio station should move down that end. It's a government building, and maybe some other use is made of that fantastic, iconic, piece of land up on Douglas Head. That was just an interesting bit of tittle-tattle that came up. But one thing that did catch my eye was a social media post by a well-known hairdresser, well-known, well-respected on, I think it's Queen's Promenade or Central Promenade. And it was an absolute diatribe of criticism against the works on the promenade that had been obviously going on for years and affected his business, and it really made my eyes pop out. It really did to see that. So there must be a lot of frustration in that area for many people.
That particular individual has their business a few down from my brother's business, so I know him. And a whole row of businesses in that area have been working together, and they're so frustrated because there's no parking in that area now. So I'm talking about the Castlemona stretch of shops.
But we're nearly hitting the finish line, aren't we, on this? And you mentioned about hotels. I think people are involved in that kind of trade. What is the future of tourism on the Isle of Man, and have we got any employment revenue opportunities, do you think?
I mean, it's hard to say. I know the hoteliers are at the stage where a lot of them are giving up. There's a lot of them. A lot of the hotels have been put up for sale this year. In the Douglas area, I think last time I checked there was about 9 up for sale. And they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. They're just fed up of it. I mean, I've had people saying to me they've decided that they're gonna next year they're gonna sell.
So one solution could be a compulsory purchase by government, and transform that area into affordable housing, possibly.
It wouldn't happen though. The government wouldn't touch it because they'd probably rather pass that on to their pals in the housing development companies, which we have a few popular ones on the island. I won't mention them.
But surely there is some scope there, because some of the hotels, I think, in that zone are tired and do need investment, and perhaps they don't meet the needs. So you look at the busiest hotel, or one of the busiest, is the Premier Inn. And the reason why is people like it. It's clean, it's simple, you know what you're going to get. It's a comfy bed and a good breakfast. And it's all new. We haven't got wood chip wallpaper peeling off, by the light switch, that sort of thing. So you wonder, look, is this a chance now where we could solve the housing problem and sort the hoteliers out?
It's a difficult one because as a normal resident, I can see the likes of the Premier Inn is doing very well because I spoke to a gentleman a couple of days ago who comes in every week from Port Erin with his wife, and they go for a night out in Douglas, have a few drinks, have a meal, and instead of paying, apparently they were quoted £70 to be home after midnight. So they stay in the Premier Inn for 2 nights, which they love. But I've also heard from other hoteliers in Douglas that it's done them a lot of damage because they can't compete with Premier Inn prices.
Exactly, and I think we're at a bit of a crossroads. But really, if the borders do open, we need to attract people to come and enjoy where we live and do nice things. Do you see that as perhaps an area for growth?
Yeah, I think the Isle of Man has got huge potential for attracting people here, tourism, if we do it right. We do need to invest in that. There's things that we could do. I mean, again, that's not really my field, so I couldn't throw any ideas out there. I know when I'm out of my league, sort of thing. But somebody with the right mind could definitely develop something on the island that would attract people here. I mean, I was watching your thing the other day with Derek and Michael.
Oh yeah.
They were talking about the likes of the steam trains and the MER and things like that, the horse trams. Yeah, I kind of agreed with some of what they said and disagreed with other parts. In some ways, it is part of the heritage. It would be a shame to see it all go. But I also agree that I don't think it's a attraction for tourists to come to the Isle of Man. It's a bonus. I think they would use it if they come anyway, but I don't think they would come here just for that.
I think we need to keep some of the crown jewels, certainly the steam railway and the electric railway, because that is unique. Okay, it's unique. There might be some... It was but the horse trams could actually be anywhere, couldn't they? They could be. There's nothing really unique about them. But that's one for another time, and we'll see them in action on the show, on the promenade. So Let me see. You perhaps sitting on the fence a little at the moment. What should we do for September? Shall we stand? Shall we not? What might be the tipping point that makes you do it?
Well, I think the problem is the last election, I got a taste of it. I mean, I got involved in politics in 2006, and I spent the first 6 of those years standing in the background, learning from other MHKs, helping them on their campaigns, and learning. And that was what I felt was the right thing to do. And I think anyone who comes along and just thinks on a whim, let's stand for election, I don't have much faith in that. I think you've got to put the work in. You've got to learn as much as you can about the process, what goes into a manifesto, everything like that. And then if you still think you want to do it, go for it. The people will decide one way or another whether you're the right person or not. But I was really disheartened my last election because, I mean, the responses I was getting on the door were really nice, but at the same time, quite worrying. I mean, I had people saying to me, "You've got no chance. You're too nice." Or another person said to me, "You're not corrupt enough."
Ooh, dear me. What kind of message does that send out? You're not corrupt enough. That's incredible, isn't it? What's the perception of the House if people are saying that?
I mean, you've just brought a great one up about the granny farming. I mean, I know a lot of candidates who are now MHKs who got in with those votes. They see it as an easy vote. But I always refused. Maybe it's because I've worked in the healthcare sector. I refused to go around nursing homes, residential homes, and take advantage of those people. I think it's disgusting.
It's exploitation, isn't it?
It is. And a lot of those people, they might have dementia, and they don't even know really what you're talking about. But they'll sign the absent voter form, not knowing what it even is.
Oh, you wonder. But let's not go down that road at the moment. Look, we're just coming up to 35 minutes, so I think it'll be time to just press the off button soon. But thank you so much for having a chat, and maybe we'll hook up again when your decision process is a little clearer. If you have got any comments or questions, please put them in the box. Subscribe if you like, and we'll come back to this anyway, Kevin. I'll tell you what. Let's have a look at what the order paper is over the next few months, and let's just catch up and see if we can put the pieces of the jigsaw together. Okay.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks very much for inviting me on.